Backstory: the true story behind The Conjuring. 2013 smash hit horror movie The Conjuring introduced us to ghost hunting couple Ed and Lorraine Warren and their investigation into the creepy haunting case of the Perron family. The true story of the Perron haunting didn't exactly go down the same way as it does in the film, but the family's real-life account of what happened in that house is arguably just as terrifying. Before the Perrons ever moved into the house and experienced anything strange, they received a chilling warning from their neighbors. For the sake of your family, keep the lights on at night. The truly crazy stuff didn't start happening right away, but the family did start noticing weird noises and missing or moved objects almost immediately. Years later, Cynthia Perron recalled that her toys would mysteriously move around the room or end up stuck underneath her bed as if someone had angrily thrown them aside. The first spirits the Perron children encountered were pretty peaceful and would actually tuck them in at night, like phantom babysitters. Andrea and Cynthia Perron said a ghostly woman would come into their room and kiss them on their forehead before they went to sleep. Spooky, but not the Exorcist territory. Then one night, the Perron girls began to hear disembodied voices, claiming there were bodies hidden in the walls of the house. Eventually, the whole family got woken up at 5:15 every morning by the smell of rotting flesh filling the house, like bread baking in the oven. Andrea Perron also claims that a particularly malevolent spirit began tormenting her and her sisters so brutally that she refuses to go into any specifics about the otherworldly abuse to this day. The Perron girl's mother, Carolyn, says that around this time, the spirit of a woman in gray appeared next to her bed, moaning, get out, I'll drive you out with death and gloom." Andrea Perron said in an interview that whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of the house, and she resented the competition my mother posed for that position. The woman in gray could possibly have been Bathsheba, the hideous witch that was the primary antagonist of The Conjuring and the chief figure in the Perrons' real-life haunting. Initially, Bathsheba began attacking the Perrons like a classic poltergeist, pinching, jabbing, and shoving them with sudden bursts of invisible force. But then she upped her game by possessing Carolyn. While inhabiting Carolyn's body, Bathsheba terrorized the family, inflicting severe bodily harm on both Carolyn and her children in bouts that would leave her feeling weak and drained. In the film, Carolyn goes to see Ed and Lorraine Warren giving a lecture on demonic possession. In real life, it was a family friend that went to see the Warrens on behalf of the Perrons. It apparently didn't take much convincing. According to Cynthia, the Warrens heard their story and immediately decided they needed to pay the alleged haunted house a visit. Despite banishing the spirit of Bathsheba and saving the Perron family in the film, in actuality, Ed and Lorraine Warren really didn't manage to do anything to help. In fact, the Warrens came back several times over the next 10 years and weren't able to cleanse the house or break the curse. Lorraine claimed to have felt an evil presence in the home and conducted a seance with Carolyn in that terrifying basement. But it did more harm than good. Andrea Perron snuck downstairs and saw her mother speaking a foul, otherworldly language and get levitated across the room, a scene that still haunts her to this day. One of the most memorable scares in The Conjuring involves the family playing a game of hide and clap, but as it turns out, the Perrons' real-life game of hide and seek was much more terrifying. Cynthia Perron says that day, while playing hide and seek on the farm with her sisters, she hid in a wood box without any latch, lock, or ventilation, and something trapped her inside. According to Cynthia, "I'm pushing and pushing, I'm kicking and pushing and screaming, and nobody can hear me." Her sister Nancy finally heard and came to let her out, and the box opened easily. Now, in every horror movie about a haunted house, the first thing you shout at the screen is, "Just leave!" Unfortunately, real life can be just as scary as a haunted house, and the Perrons simply couldn't afford to move. According to Andrea Perron, the farm was losing value almost daily, which made it impossible to sell, and if they had simply walked away from the house, they'd have lost everything. So they were forced to live in the house and endure the violent haunting for an entire decade. The Perrons were finally able to sell the farm in 1980, and they hightailed it across several state lines and never came back. Even after moving out of the house over 30 years ago, the parents claim that Bathsheba's curse continues to haunt them today. While the family was being interviewed for The Conjuring, Andrea Perrin says that a mysterious wind suddenly swept through them, knocking down all the cameras and lights. At the same time the wind struck in the interview, Carolyn Perrin, who had decided to skip the interview at the last minute, fell down in her hotel room and broke her hip. The family all agrees it was Bathsheba's anger over her story being exposed. Despite what happens in the movie, the haunting at the parents' farm didn't end with the parents. According to Andrea, every person who has lived in the house since has experienced some form of supernatural harassment. Andrea claims that the man who moved in right after her family to try and renovate the farm ran away screaming, leaving behind his car, his clothes, and all his tools. After that, the landowners refused to go near the house, and it sat vacant for years. The current owner claims she hears voices and footsteps coming from empty rooms, but hasn't experienced anything like the violent haunting that allegedly terrorized the parents. In The Conjuring, Bathsheba Thayer was a witch who sacrificed her child to Satan and hung herself, infecting the farmhouse with a malevolent spirit that would later attack the Perrin family. The parents claim that Bathsheba's ghost has loomed over them for decades. However, according to historical records, Bathsheba Thayer was the married mother of 4 children. Although 3 of her kids died young, there's no evidence to suggest she had anything to do with it, and Bathsheba herself died of a stroke and was buried peacefully next to her family. But the witch story makes for a much better movie. The Conjuring's bone-chilling ghost story spawned a whole franchise of horror films, including Annabelle and The Nun. But the true story behind the parents' haunting is equally captivating and creepy. Check back next time to learn more about your favorite movies from Backstory.